It was an incredible feeling. Their mobile game Kandy Korn Kaper had just been named Best New Mobile Game of the Year. As a result, the three owners of LTH Limited went to celebrate the occasion at their favorite bar in San Jose. They chose the company name as an abbreviation for Los Tres Hombres. The use of Spanish was deliberately ironic. Seth was Anglo-American, Rajiv was Indian-American, and Barry was African-American. Seth dropped out of Stanford during his senior year to start the business, and was soon joined by Barry and Rajiv. The trio worked out of Seth's parents' garage in Santa Clara for 18 months until they raised enough money to rent their own office. Now, thanks to the success of Kandy Korn Kaper, they started making serious money for the first time in their young lives. After an hour or so of drinking and reminiscing, Barry and Rajiv took out their phones and started playing. Already slightly tipsy, Seth went to the bar to get another beer. While waiting for the bartender to pay attention to him, he couldn't help but notice the woman sitting next to him, a stunning brunette in tight jeans and a jersey that emphasized her ample breasts. He had never been particularly successful with women, and his passion for gaming and programming kept his opportunities to a minimum after he left Palo Alto. But alcohol and the success of the company gave him enough courage to try his hand. "So," he asked, trying to sound casual, "do you come here often?" The woman turned her dark eyes towards him for a moment. "Not really," she replied and looked away again. Normally, such cold treatment would have made him retreat, but something pushed him to try again. "Since you're new here, let me treat you to another drink." She looked at him, and he prepared himself for another refusal. But a barely noticeable smile crossed her lips, and instead of rejecting him, she answered, "I think it will be good." Encouraged, Seth waved vigorously to the bartender. When he accepted the order, Seth again turned to his new friend. "My name is Seth," he said, holding out his hand, "Seth Masterson." With a smile, she returned his handshake in a formal manner. "My name is Lorelei Hamilton, but you can just say Lori." "Nice to meet you, Seth Masterson." The conversation became less tense. He learned that she was a management consultant who traveled a lot. In response, he told her about his friends and business, and was disappointed to learn that she had never heard of Kandy Korn Kaper. "Sorry," she said, "I just don't have time for games." Despite this, Seth felt that the conversation was going smoothly, and as he listened to stories of her travels, he began to get lost in her dark eyes. Suddenly, Rajiv's loud shout brought him out of his thoughts. "Hey, buddy, let's get out of here. Barry wants to grab a taco and get back to working on the new game." Seth didn't want to leave, but his loyalty to his friends turned out to be stronger. He turned again to those mesmerizing eyes. "Sorry, but I really need to go. My guys are counting on me." He looked at her longingly. "Can I see you again?" She smiled and shrugged. "Maybe we'll meet here sometime." Rajiv shouted again, and now Seth was clearly tormented by doubts. "Can I at least take your number?" "Why not?" She shrugged and pulled out her phone from her bag. After they exchanged numbers, he reluctantly went to his friends, looking back at her every step of the way. She watched as the three guys left the restaurant and then returned to her cocktail. "Who was it? Who were you talking to?" Barry asked in the Uber car. "She was amazing." "Yes, that's for sure," Seth answered. "She really is like that." "Yeah, too good for you, bro," Rajiv teased. "Maybe," Seth said, "but I have her number." He held up his phone like a trophy. "Woo-hoo! Well done, Seth," Barry exclaimed. "We'll still arrange a date for you." Seth blushed, but as he drove away, he looked out the window again, hoping to see her again. The next day, Seth couldn't stop thinking about Lori. He was so distracted that Rajiv approached him after lunch. "Look, dude, Barry and I both know what or who is on your mind. So why don't you just call her and ask her out?" "I can't do that," Seth protested. "I don't even know what we'll do." Rajiv shrugged. "Tomorrow is Wednesday. Invite her to watch the show with us." The show was an epic fantasy series that the trio watched religiously every Wednesday. Seth wasn't sure if this was a good idea, but he couldn't think of anything better to do, and he really wanted to see Lori. Finally, he took the plunge and called her, and to his surprise and delight, she turned out to be a big fan of the show and agreed to the invitation. Just before the program started, the doorbell rang and Lori was standing there with a bag full of tacos and a six-pack of beer. Three young people greeted her with enthusiastic cries. As the four sat down in front of the 80-inch screen, they began discussing the show. While eating food and drinking, Seth, Barry, and Rajiv were surprised by Lori's knowledge of the plot and characters. After the episode ended, there was a lively discussion about the events of the episode and their possible consequences. Finally, Lori stood up and smiled at the company. "It was fun, guys, but I have to go home," she said. "I have an important call with the East Coast this morning." Seth stood up to walk her to the door, suddenly realizing that neither the place nor the format of the evening were conducive to getting to know this intriguing woman. I'm sorry," he began to apologize. "I know that this is probably not quite what you expected." She stopped him by touching his lips with her fingers. "SHH, everything was great. I liked it. Does this mean, I can call you again? Maybe we should go somewhere for dinner or something," he muttered. "Of course, if you want," she replied. Then she kissed him tenderly, turned and walked away, leaving him longing for more. When he returned inside, his flatmates immediately attacked him with comments. "Damn, this woman is absolutely stunning," Rajiv exclaimed, "and she knows more about the show than I do." "Yes," Barry added, "and have you noticed that she's also damn beautiful? Listen, brother, if you get tired of her, I will gladly take her on." "Take it easy," Seth snapped. "She's a lady, not a piece of meat for you too." Rajiv and Barry exchanged glances. "Whoa, dude, no offense," Barry quickly backed down. "We're just teasing you a little." "Yes," supported Rajiv, "we have never seen you so in love." 2 days later, Seth called Lori and was relieved but also worried to find that she had answered his call. "I'm sorry about that evening and about the behavior of my neighbors," he began. "Anyway, I'd like to make up for it by taking you out to dinner at a decent place this time, I promise." "I think it's possible. Pick me up at 8 on Saturday," she replied and gave him her address. When he hung up the phone, his flatmates were surprised to hear his joyful cry. On Saturday night, when Seth got to the address Lori had given him, he asked the Lyft driver to wait for him at the curb. When she opened the door, he was wearing new dark jeans, a plaid shirt, and a sports jacket. Smiling, she reached over and removed the tag he hadn't noticed on the jacket. When the driver dropped the couple off at Le Papillon restaurant, they were quickly shown to a table. Over glasses of wine, they began to share details of their lives. Lori told him about her work at one of the large consulting firms. "My specialization is the high-tech sector. I think I've worked with every major tech giant at least once." "Giants?" he asked again in confusion. She smiled. "Well, yes, Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netscape, and Google." "Wow," he said, impressed. "And what do you do for them?" She shook her head and smiled again. "Sorry, I can't talk about it. Non-disclosure agreements have been signed with each of these companies. The good news is that they pay us very well, but the bad news is the constant travel. I've traveled all over the country and many countries around the world, but the only thing I see are airports and hotel rooms. But enough about me. Tell me about yourself and your business." He shook his head. "What our little company does is nothing compared to the people you work with every day." "I don't agree, Seth. Digital entertainment is one of the most promising trends of our time, and the creativity and ingenuity that goes into some games is on par with what the companies I work with do." Flattered, Seth began talking about Los Tres Hombres, especially Kandy Korn Kaper. He was modest in describing their success, but Lori could sense how excited he was about their prospects. She encouraged him to continue, and by the time he finished, he was surprised to find that he had been talking throughout the entire dinner. "Sorry," he apologized. "It's not like me to take over the entire conversation." "It's okay," she objected. "I was interested." As they left the restaurant, he suggested that Lori continue the evening, but to his disappointment, she said that she needed to go home. The Lyft driver pulled up too quickly for Seth, and soon they were outside Lori's apartment. He politely walked her to the door and told her how much he enjoyed the evening. She leaned towards him and gave him a short but gentle kiss. As he turned to go back to the car, she suddenly grabbed his arm. "Tell the driver to leave," she said. Confused, he let the driver go. When he returned, Lori had already left the apartment door ajar, but she had disappeared from sight. Hesitantly, he stepped inside and closed the door behind him. "Lori," he called uncertainty. "I'm here," her voice came from the far end of the corridor. He followed the sound and, reaching the doorway, stopped in amazement. Lori stood in her bedroom, wearing only a lacy black bra, thong, and high heels. Smiling, she slowly turned her back to him and, reaching for the clasp of her bra, whispered, "Can you help me with this?" Seth hoped it wasn't a dream. They had sex. When he woke up, she came out of the bathroom, already showered and dressed. "Are you leaving?" he asked with a plaintive note in his voice. "I was hoping that we could. I would like to too, dear, but I'm afraid that my boss won't approve of my being late," she said. "When can I see you again?" he asked. She came up to kiss him tenderly on the lips. "I have to fly to Los Angeles this afternoon, but I'll be back tomorrow evening. I'll call you when my plane lands." She gently stroked his cheek, then stood up and headed towards the door. "You can use the shower, just remember to lock the front door when you leave," she said and disappeared. He remained lying on the bed. The scent of her body rose from the sheets, reminding him of their magical night together. At the same time, he felt acute sadness that he would not see her for a long time. Finally, he forced himself to get up and go to the shower. Later, he walked around her apartment. There weren't many things there that gave insight into her life, but everything seemed special because it belonged to her. Reluctantly, he locked the front door and found a bird scooter to ride to the office. Barry and Rajiv were already working, but as soon as Seth walked in, they stopped everything and started making fun of him. To their surprise, their crude jokes and embarrassed innuendos had no effect on Seth, and after a few minutes they looked at each other. "Oh, looks like our boy fell into a love pit," Barry noted. "It seems so," agreed Rajiv. "See that big pink arrow sticking out of his back?" Seth rolled his eyes. "It was just a date, guys, just a date." But when he turned to his monitor, behind him, his friends continued to look at each other and exchange humorous glances. On the day Lori was due back, Seth would get nervous, wondering when he should call her. He didn't need to worry. She called him herself as soon as her plane landed. They met that evening and almost every evening after that, unless Lori was on a business trip. There was no need for Rajiv and Barry to continue making fun of their comrade. No one had any doubt that Seth had fallen head over heels in love with the beautiful brunette. With everything going so well, Seth was stunned to visit Lori and discover that she was not alone. Standing next to her was a respectable man, several years older than Lori, who put his hand on her shoulder. Before Seth could say anything, Lori led the man towards him. "Seth, I want you to meet my brother, Robert. He's in town for a few days. I haven't seen him for a long time, so I invited him to join us." Sighing with relief, Seth relaxed and shook the man's hand. Over drinks, they learned that Lori's brother was a financial consultant for one of the nation's major wealth management firms. "Robert manages investments for a number of wealthy clients," Lori said. "He oversees a portfolio of almost $500 million. "Well, that's a slight exaggeration," Robert replied modestly. "But almost certainly," Lori added proudly. The men got along well, and a few days later Seth was pleasantly surprised when Robert called and invited him for coffee. They met at Vero's, and when they received their orders, Robert looked at Seth closely. "Seth, I like you, and you are clearly a smart and hardworking young man. But the main thing is that my sister is crazy about you. I don't have the right to tell you what to do, but I hope you won't offend her. She is my little sister, and I naturally protect her. Robert, I swear I would never do anything to hurt Lori." "To tell you the truth, I'm crazy about her too," Seth replied, leaning a little closer. "Can I ask for your advice?" When Robert nodded, Seth pulled out a small velvet-lined box from his pocket. Inside was an old-fashioned Edwardian wedding ring. My grandmother gave it to me, Seth explained, and her grandmother gave it to her. Do you think Lori will like it? Robert examined the ring carefully. It's a platinum ring with an old mine-cut diamond in the center, he said. I would guess that the stone weighs more than 2 carats. He looked at Seth with a smile. I think she'll like it and be touched that you decided to give it to her. The young man beamed. The next day when they met, Seth got down on one knee and proposed to Lori, holding out the ring as an offering to the goddess. She screamed joyfully and accepted him in the most obvious way. After that, she lay in his arms, kissing him and holding him, as if she was afraid that he would slip away. I don't want a long engagement, Seth, she said. I would be happy to get married next week. Seth was pleasantly surprised. He was sure that Lori would need a long time to plan the wedding. But when he asked her about it, he was even more surprised to learn that she did not want to have a grand ceremony. I've seen my friends go down this path, she explained, and I don't want anything like that. Big weddings are prohibitively expensive, take a lot of time to prepare, create conflicts between friends and family, and in the end, everyone gets so drunk that they barely enjoy themselves or remember anything at all. To be honest, I would be quite happy to run to the magistrate. It took Seth a while to get used to the idea, but the more he thought about it, the more he liked it. The only close family he had left was his older brother, so he didn't have anyone to consider. Of course, he wanted Rajiv and Barry to come to the wedding, but he knew that they were not interested in any formal ceremony. To be honest, now that he had proposed, all he wanted to do was make Lori his wife as quickly as possible. The only thing that Seth did not know how to organize correctly was the issue of the marriage contract, and he decided to consult Robert on this topic. They met for lunch, and after finishing their sandwiches, Seth popped a question. Do we need to sign a marriage contract? He asked. I heard that many couples are doing this now. Robert raised an eyebrow. Are you planning to cheat on Lori? Seth was shocked. God, no. I would never do anything like that to her. But one of the guys mentioned it, and I thought I'd check it out. Robert grimaced. If you were Bill Gates or Warren Buffett, then yes, of course. But you're not them, so I don't think you need it, especially considering the likely consequences. What are the consequences? Seth asked. If you tell Lori you want her to sign a prenuptial agreement, you're essentially saying, I don't trust you. Is this the message you want to send to your fiancé when you first start your life together? No, of course I don't want to. Look, you just need to get married and start enjoying life together. You don't need any additional complications. In the end, that's exactly what the happy couple did. Seth's brother, Marcus, flew in from Los Angeles to be his best man, and Robert walked Lori down the aisle in a 10-minute ceremony officiated by the Deputy Marriage Commissioner at the Santa Clara office. Afterwards, the four of them and Barry and Rajiv went to Agave Taqueria for tacos and margaritas. Then the newly minted Mr. and Mrs. Masterson went on their honeymoon to a cozy small hotel on Monterey Bay. Both decided not to check their phones or read messages for the entire week. When they returned from their honeymoon, Robert invited them to a meeting to raise a few glasses to improve their health, wealth, and happiness. And given what Lori told me about your business, he added, it seems like you're doing pretty well with the wealth part. Lori tilted her head, looking at Seth. You know, now that your business is starting to take off, you really should talk to Robert. I'm sure he could give you some good advice. Sister, I haven't done this kind of financial planning for a long time, Robert protested. Oh, come on, Robert. Just take a look at Seth's finances and see if you have any recommendations for him. Robert looked at Seth with a question. Do you think you need this? Well, how can I refuse the expert advice of my new brother-in-law? A few days later, Robert came to Seth's office to take a look at his financial situation. Seth quickly prepared the balance and handed it to his new brother-in-law. Robert asked a few questions and then carefully folded the balance sheet and budget, tucking them into his pocket. One lesson I've learned is never give advice without careful study and analysis, he said. Let's meet next week, and I'll give you my recommendations. But there is something you should do right now, Robert added, and Seth looked at him with interest. You and Lori should open joint checking and savings accounts and close your individual ones. I plan to do this over time, but why rush? Seth was surprised. It's a matter of protection, Robert explained. Imagine, God forbid, something happens to you. If your salary and savings are only in your account, Lori will not be able to access the money until the end of the probate process. This could take months, and she would be left without a livelihood. I didn't know that, Seth answered, and the next day he and Lori went to the bank. When he told his wife about the conversation with Robert, to his surprise, she suddenly burst into tears. What happened, Lori? He asked excitedly. I just can't stand the thought of something happening to you, she replied, wiping away her tears. A minute later, her sadness was replaced by a warm smile. But it's so touching that you think about me. She wrapped her arms around his neck and hugged him tightly. Seth mentally thanked Robert for the helpful advice. A few days later, Lori returned home in the evening with a question for Seth. How would you feel if I quit my job? She plopped down on the couch in their cramped little living room. I thought you liked your job, he replied in surprise. I used to like it, but constant business trips and endless demands take all my strength. I think I'm just burned out. I don't want to leave forever, but I need to take a break. She sat down next to him and laid her head on his shoulder. The good news is that I finally paid off my student loans, so you don't have to worry about them. Seth didn't know that his new wife had outstanding loans, but the thought that they had already been paid off reassured him. After a minute, he decided to do the right thing. Look, if you really feel this way, then you should do it. With the way things are going at LTH, we are unlikely to need additional income. You are sure? She asked worriedly, and when he nodded, Lori kissed him. As their evening continued, Seth was confident that he had given the correct answer. The next day, after Lori quit, Seth returned home to find his wife sitting on the couch with a glass of wine. So how did you spend your first day of freedom? He asked. Oh, I spent it looking at houses with a realtor, she replied casually. And guess what? She showed me a house that would be perfect for us. We'll go see it in half an hour. I know we'll need a house eventually, but I thought we'd live here in your apartment until we get settled. Don't be stupid, Lori laughed. This apartment is not suitable for us. We need at least a couple extra bedrooms, 2 or 3 bathrooms, and a yard for our kids when we starting a family. She stood up, finished her wine, and motioned for him to follow her. You'll love this house, darling, I'm sure. The house that Lori loved was truly charming, but its multimillion-dollar price terrified Seth. After they completed the inspection, he tried to dampen her enthusiasm. Honey, the house is magnificent, but it seems to me that we cannot afford something so expensive. She waved it off carelessly. Seriously, Seth, the agent said we won't find anything like this for less. And besides, don't worry about the price. I've already talked to Robert, and he has a plan. Seth was just about to meet with Robert to get his recommendations, and now this question worried him even more. Brother Lori quickly dispelled his doubts. I've looked at your finances, Seth, and they're in perfect order. You earn more than enough to support the two of you, and you already have some savings. But there is one cloud on the horizon, and it may be large. Seth's mood immediately darkened. What are you talking about? He asked anxiously. Do you like to gamble? Robert asked. Of course not. I've worked too hard to risk what I have in a casino. And yet you bet everything you have on one shot, and you don't even realize it. I don't understand what you're talking about, admitted Seth. Robert shrugged. It's simple. You invest everything you have into one business. This means that if something goes wrong, you will lose everything. This is not the smartest strategy. You need to diversify your assets. I think I understand what you mean, but how do I do this? Asked Seth. It's simple. All you have to do is find a venture capitalist who will buy some or all of your stake in the business. This way, you will withdraw your money and be able to invest it in something less risky. But I believe in our business. Everything is going well for us, And there is no reason to think that the next game will not be just as successful, Seth countered. Besides, if I withdraw money and invest it in the stock market, it will also be a kind of bet, just at a different table. I agree with you, Robert replied, surprising Seth. But what if you could make another investment that is almost guaranteed to make a profit? Seth looked at him in bewilderment. You need to buy a house, Robert continued. This is not only an excellent tax shelter, but also an opportunity to invest in real estate, which will immediately begin to increase in price. You can't lose, Seth. Plus, you know how badly Lori wants to buy a house. But we can't afford to buy a house, Seth objected, especially now that Lori has quit her job. Exactly, Robert retorted. You need to take some of your money out of business and invest it in real estate. It's a win-win. After Robert left, Seth had a lot to think about. All three business partners lived in conditions of austerity, receiving minimum wages and investing almost all the money in the development of the company. Their first game was successful, but what if the next one isn't as successful? Their situation could change quickly. Perhaps Robert was right. Now is the time to withdraw some of the money and use it for other purposes. While the company was gaining momentum due to the success of Kandy Korn Kaper, they were able to use other people's money to finance future projects. That's what all successful startups in Silicon Valley did, right? When Seth shared this idea with his partners, the conversation did not go as smoothly as he expected. Rajiv and Barry vehemently opposed selling shares of the company to what Rajiv called venture predators. After several heated discussions, the partners made a decision to buy out Seth's share. They had to take out a large loan to complete the deal, which they had previously tried to avoid, and this made them very angry. Reluctantly, they agreed that Seth would continue to work for the company, but no longer as a partner, but as an employee. Seth felt guilty for his action, as Barry called it, but now he had more money than he ever expected, and it made him feel better. When he told Robert about this, his brother-in-law praised him for his wisdom. Now you need to make that money work for you, and buying a house is definitely the right place to start. You will see, this will be the best investment of your life. Being a cautious man, Seth did some research into the San Jose real estate market, and the increase in average home prices he found was truly impressive. When he approached Robert again, his new advisor suggested another strategy: buy a house with cash rather than taking out a mortgage. With your financial situation, you have a unique opportunity to start a family life without a mortgage hanging over your head. All the profit from the increase in value will go to you and Lori, and on top of that, you will save a fortune in interest. But that will waste almost all the money I received from LTH. You were going to invest this money anyway. What did you want to do? Buy cryptocurrency or play futures? With that kind of money in your hands, you are in a position that others can only dream of. Take advantage of it, Seth. Lori was delighted at the prospect, and the young man eventually followed his brother-in-law's advice. A month later, the newlyweds were already moving into their new home. A few weeks later, when they had settled in and Lori had the furniture and decor in order the way she wanted, she told Seth that she needed to go out for a few hours. I need to do one thing, and then I'll probably stop by Robert's. I haven't seen him for a long time, so I'll stay with him for a few hours. Seth nodded, glad to have a break from all the little errands he'd been doing at Lori's request. When Lori rang Robert's doorbell, he was already waiting for her. Well, he asked with a smile, how is the new bride doing? She walked up to him and abruptly pushed him onto the sofa. Oh my God, I can't stand it anymore. Living with this naive little nerd, pretending that I love him madly, and during sex with him, I need sex with a real man. With these words, they had sex. Lori pulled away and looked at her lover. Listen, I'm serious. I don't want to wait any longer. It feels like we're dragging this scam out forever. I want to end this right away. I think so too, baby. We're almost there. Give us another week or two and we'll strike. She sighed heavily. Okay, I guess I can wait another week, but only one. This is my girl, Robert encouraged her. Now remember the plan. Once you're out of town, I'll deal with the rest. A week later, Lori told Seth the bad news over dinner. Honey, I need to leave tomorrow. My aunt at the nursing home in Seattle wants to see me, and I feel like I should go see her before it's too late. Do you want me to go with you? That's nice of you, but she doesn't know you. I'll go alone. He frowned. How long are you leaving? For 3 days, she said, and his frown deepened. I know you have to go, but I don't like it, he said with offense. She took his chin and kissed him. I'll be back before you know it. Behave while I'm gone. Don't worry about it, he replied seriously, and she thanked him with a smile. The next day, after Lori left, Seth received a call from Robert. Hey, I heard from Lori that you'll be alone for a few days. Why don't we meet for drinks and dinner? Sounds good, Seth agreed, and they agreed on a time and place. When Lyft dropped him off, Seth walked into the bar, looking around for Robert. He sat in the far corner and waved his hand. Next to him was an attractive red-haired girl. Hey, Seth, meet Serena. She is my colleague from the office. Seth shook her hand and then sat down on the couch next to Serena, who was between him and Robert. Robert continued to bring drinks from the noisy bar, and Seth was pleasantly surprised at how interesting the siren turned out to be. She was also very open, often touching Seth during conversations. As the evening wore on, Seth noticed that it was becoming increasingly difficult for him to focus on the girl's face. Suddenly, he raised his head sharply, and the whole room swam before his eyes. Oh, damn, how much did I drink? He muttered out loud. Robert and Serena exchanged glances, and then Robert stood up and walked over to him from the other side of the couch. Hey, buddy, looks like you've had too much. Why don't we take you home? Seth tried to object, but soon realized that he was standing, leaning on the shoulders of Robert and Serena. They took him outside and put him in Robert's car. When they reached Seth's new house, they pulled the keys out of his pocket and Siren opened the door, ushering him inside. How about another drink? She asked, continuing to support him by the waist. Seth shook his head. I don't think this is a good idea. She cast a questioning glance at Robert, who nodded at her. She turned to the drunken young man. Come on, honey, let's get you to bed. Seth managed to make it to the bedroom, but there he collapsed on the bed. We can't let you sleep in your clothes, Siren said softly. Let's take it off. It was not easy, but soon the young woman took off all his clothes. Then, under Robert's greedy gaze, Siren quickly took off her clothes and climbed into bed next to Seth. Siren looked at Robert with concern. Are you sure this will work? I think he's too drunk to function. He didn't drink that much, Robert said. It's just that this medicine made him so obedient. And with the amount of pills I added to his drinks, he can probably do a lot. Calmed, the girl got down to business. With that, he pulled out his phone and quickly wrote a message. Lori entered the room and turned on the light. Honey, the flight was canceled, so I came back early. Then, seeing Seth and the prostitute, she screamed, What the hell are you doing? I can't believe you're already cheating on me. She pulled out her phone and started taking pictures of what was happening, and Robert motioned for Serena to turn away from the camera. Then, while Lori hit Seth, Siren calmly got dressed and hurriedly left the bedroom. She and Robert quickly left, leaving a stunned Seth alone with his angry wife. Lori, Seth pleaded, I don't know what happened. Just a minute ago, I was sitting at the bar, and then I woke up when you entered the room. I didn't do anything. I don't need this crap. She screamed at him. How do you explain this? I can't be near you for a minute. I'm leaving, and the next person you talk to is my lawyer. The rest of the night turned into a real nightmare for Seth. He was still dazed from the alcohol and the drugs Robert had put in his drinks, but the adrenaline rush from Lori's appearance kept him awake. Torn between chemical extremes, he drank a lot of water and took aspirin. At dawn, he managed to eat some toast without losing consciousness. With a heavy heart, he called his brother. When Marcus responded, all Seth could get out was, I screwed up, before he burst into tears. Gradually, Marcus managed to figure out the essence of what happened. When he felt he had heard enough, he said to his brother, I'll be on the first flight from Los Angeles. Just don't do anything stupid until I get there. Promise me. Keeping his word, Marcus took the next available flight, and Seth met him at the San Jose airport. The 5-year difference had always made it difficult for the brothers to be truly close. But now, in his desperate situation, Seth was incredibly grateful to see his older brother. They hugged in the arrivals hall, and Seth felt humiliated as he burst into tears again. He always admired his brother and hated showing him his weakness. Marcus shrugged it off. You went through hell. I saw how much you loved that woman at your wedding. No wonder you're in this state right now. Let's go home and then think about what to do next. Returning home, Seth explained everything that had happened the previous night. Marcus then made him go back and remember the events from the wedding day until now, interrupting frequently to clarify details. Finally, he leaned back on the sofa, folding his arms across his chest. None of this makes sense, he remarked. I don't believe for a second that you deliberately intended to cheat on your wife. It's just not in your nature. We need to dig deeper and find out what really happened. Suddenly, a glimmer of hope appeared on Seth's face. Robert, he was there. I should call him. Maybe he can help me figure it out. Seth grabbed the phone and quickly dialed Robert's number. Marcus watched as a smile appeared on his brother's face at first, but it quickly faded. Robert's tone was cold and harsh. He didn't even give Seth a chance to say anything. Seth, I'm very disappointed in you. First of all, I've never seen you get so drunk you really went overboard, and I couldn't believe how you pestered Serena. Damn, dude, you've only been married a couple of weeks, but I didn't pester her, I swear. Do you know how to contact her? She can help me explain everything. Good luck with that, Robert snorted. She was just a girl I started talking to at the bar while I was waiting for you. I don't even know her last name. But I thought she was your colleague. No matter how it is, look, Seth, whether you find her or not doesn't change the facts. You slept with this woman, and in doing so you caused Lori great pain and destroyed your marriage to the core. No, it can't be that there is no way out. Sorry, Seth, but he's not here. The sooner you accept this, the better for everyone. With these words, he hung up. Seth looked at Marcus and shook his head sadly. Before the brother could ask questions, the doorbell rang. Seth ran to the entrance, hoping that it was Lori who had returned, but when he opened the door, a stranger was standing on the threshold. Are you Seth Masterson? She asked. Yes, but... Without changing her facial expression, she handed him the envelope. Mr. Masterson, you have been officially notified. She picked up her phone and took a photo, showing Seth holding the envelope, then turned and walked away without another word. As Seth slowly walked back into the living room, Marcus looked at him with sympathy. It looks like she doesn't intend to reconcile. Looks like you need to hire a lawyer. Seeing his brother's expression, he added, Don't worry, I know a good one. He's not the nicest person, but he can help you get through it. After a phone call and an appointment, Marcus informed Seth that he needed to return to Los Angeles. I have a big task that I must finish, but as soon as it is completed, I will return and help in any way I can. In the meantime, call me anytime, day or night, if you need anything. Seth had just returned home from seeing Marcus off at the airport when he suddenly heard the sound of a key in the lock of the front door. He hurried into the hallway and managed to see Lori enter the house. About, she said with surprise. I didn't expect you to be here. I just came to pick up some things, she added, avoiding his gaze. I'll leave in a few minutes. Even though she clearly didn't want to see him, Seth followed her into the bedroom, where she was gathering her clothes and personal items. He tried to apologize and begged for another chance, but she interrupted him. Seth, we talked about the importance of being faithful to each other before the wedding. The fact that you cheated on me at the first opportunity tells me everything I need to know about the kind of person you are. The sight of her reminded him of all the happy moments of their short marriage, but the coldness in her voice destroyed the faint hope that he still felt for a moment. He watched her leave, feeling hot tears on his cheeks again. 2 days later, Seth was sitting in the office of the lawyer Marcus had recommended to him. He expressed sympathy for his grief, but did not give hope. Mr. Masterson, after your brother called, I contacted your wife's lawyer. She described the evidence they are willing to present in court if you try to challenge the divorce. I was informed that your wife has photographs of you. Seth hung his head, remembering the vague details of that terrible night. The lawyer looked at Seth and made his conclusions. Under these circumstances, I see no way to successfully challenge the charge of adultery. Even if there is reasonable doubt about adultery, Mrs. Masterson still has the right to file for divorce for any reason or no reason at all. In California, no one forces people to stay married if they don't want to. So I can't do anything. Oh no, you can delay the process, require consultation, or otherwise prolong the proceedings. The only thing this will do is significantly increase your legal fees, waste the court's time, irritate the judge, and make your wife's feelings towards you more bitter. In the end, the result will be the same: you will get a divorce. What about annulment? We were married for only a short time. Wouldn't that be better? The lawyer shook his head. Under California law, a marriage can only be annulled if it can be proven that it was entered into based on fraud or duress, or if one of the spouses was insane. Do you have evidence of one of these cases? Seth sank in his chair. What about the division of property? You didn't mention this, so I assume you didn't have a prenuptial agreement regarding the distribution of assets. Seth just shook his head. It's a pity. Well, in that case, California laws are very simple. All assets must be divided equally. Seth looked at him sadly. How about the house? The lawyer nodded. I assume you bought it after the wedding. The house is in the name of both of you, isn't it? But I contributed almost all the money. Doesn't it matter? The lawyer shook his head again. It became community property as soon as you got married. So now we have to try to sell it right away. We just bought it a couple of months ago. You always have the opportunity to buy out your wife's share in the property. This might work. I have some savings and don't forget that half of these savings will go to your wife. But wait, I made most of this money. They came from. The lawyer shook his head again. Mr. Masterson, let's clarify the details of your marriage in the context of divorce and division of property. Your wife's lawyer has advised that you pooled your funds in joint checking and savings accounts. I was also informed that you encouraged Mrs. Masterson to quit her job. I didn't encourage her to quit. She herself said that she wanted to leave, and I just said that I don't mind. The lawyer nodded. Regardless of who influenced whom, you were the only source of income for the family, and Mrs. Masterson was dependent on this income. We have already established that you bought the house together with your shared funds, most of which came from me, Seth blurted out. Sorry, Mr. Masterson, but this all became community property after you got married. But this is unfair, Seth exclaimed. The older man shook his head gravely. No, it's unfair, but it's the law. He paused and, looking at Seth, added, There is one thing that puzzles me a little. Considering that your wife quit her job and is currently unemployed, she would be entitled to alimony. However, the proposed agreement makes no mention of this. I would say she wants quick closure and wants nothing more to do with you. In these circumstances, this works in your favor. Seth found little comfort in these words. The divorce was uncontested, and the young man began the painful process of dividing his assets. The good news was that their home actually increased in value in the short time they owned it. The bad news was that the profit barely covered the realtor's commission and closing costs. When the proceeds from the sale were divided, Seth again reminded himself that it was his money that was going into Lori's pocket. On the day the divorce was officially finalized, Seth was sitting on the couch in his brother's hotel room. Marcus opened a beer for him, but didn't raise a toast. There was nothing to celebrate. Okay, little brother, time to ask an awkward question. How are you doing with your finances? Need help? Seth smiled, expressing gratitude, but shook his head. Lori, divorce hit me hard. I sold my interest in Los Tres Hombres on Robert's advice and immediately invested in the house Lori wanted. When I had to sell the house, half the money went to her. And then, as a mockery, we divided what was left in the savings account, although I put most of it there. Brother, she left with more than $500,000 of my money, he snorted mockingly. And of course, that doesn't include the fact that I had to pay her legal and court fees. He sighed heavily. In the end, I'm much poorer now, but not broke. I lost my wife, my home, and my business, so I guess you could say I'm wiser, but not happier. What are you going to do now? A determined look appeared on Seth's face. I'll start everything from scratch. Barry and Rajiv are still mad at me, and it would be humiliating to go back to work at LTH anyway after everything that happened. So I decided to start a new company. There are still many opportunities in the gaming industry, and I already have an idea for a new game. It won't be easy, but I think I have enough money left to get started and last for a while. That's my plan. Marcus raised his hand for a high five. That's what I wanted to hear. Masterson doesn't give up. Listen, let's go out and celebrate the beginning of a new chapter in your life. Go ahead, Seth agreed, and they called an Uber to the sofa area. They were having a drink at the bar of one of the restaurants in this popular area when Seth suddenly inhaled sharply. Over there, he shouted, pointing to a familiar face leaving the bar. It's her, he shouted to Marcus. It's Siren. They followed her and caught up with her in the parking lot. Do you remember me? Seth asked furiously. The red-haired girl gasped, realizing who was in front of her. Oh, damn, you're the guy who made the... That's right, he growled. Thanks to you, I'm now divorced, lost my home and my company. Oh my God, I can't believe it. I'm so sorry they told me it was just a joke to teach you a lesson about loyalty. Nobody talked about divorce. Wait, who are they? I don't know who they were. It was just some guy named Robert and a woman named Lori. Robert and Lori asked you to do this. Certainly. They just told me to give you something to drink, and Robert added something to your drink. As soon as we got to your house, we undressed you. And then Lori walked in, caught you. I quickly went out, got dressed, and Robert drove me back to the bar. They said that you would all laugh about it together when everything was revealed. Sons of bitches, Seth swore. Listen, Marcus said. Are you ready to confirm your words under oath? The girl's face turned pale. I don't know, mister. I don't want to get in trouble. We're not mad at you. We're mad at those two bastards. She shook her head in alarm. Listen, I have a bad memory. I probably won't be able to remember anything from that night. Give me your driver's license, Marcus demanded. When she hesitantly handed them to him, he took a photo of them with his phone. He then walked up to her car and did the same with the license plates. Are you going to arrest me? She asked fearfully. I'm not a cop, Marcus snapped, but we can get the police involved if necessary. He then turned to Seth, who was still holding the girl's hand tightly. Let her go, brother. We can find her if we need to, but right now we have more important things to do. When they returned to Seth's apartment, Marcus suggested he call Lori. When he tried, the call immediately went to voicemail with a message that the number was no longer in service. After trying Robert's number, Seth encountered the same situation. Maybe they left the city? Seth suggested. Marcus frowned. People usually don't change their mobile phone numbers just because they move. He walked over to Seth's computer. What company did Lori work for? When Seth named her, Marcus did a quick search on the company's website, but found no information about Lori. He tried to do the same with Robert's financial company, but again to no avail. More investigations will need to be done tomorrow. The next day, Marcus contacted the HR departments of both companies. None of them had records of employees with those names. After the calls, Marcus beckoned his brother to come with him. The brothers went to Lori's old apartment, but there was a "for rent" sign at the entrance. They rushed to the rental agency, but the manager was unable to help them. She rented the apartment on a month-to-month basis starting 6 months ago. I don't usually do that, but she paid good money. When she moved out, she didn't leave any return address. In the car, Marcus asked Seth if he knew Robert's address. I have no idea, admitted Seth. I've never been there. What about the address of his company? When we met, it was usually in my office. I don't know where he worked. A brief phone search gave Marcus the address of Robert's business, But when the men arrived there, no one knew a man named Robert Hamilton. Besides, no one recognized him from the wedding photo. When all possible avenues had been exhausted, the brothers returned to Seth's apartment. "I don't understand, Marcus. What does this all mean?" Seth asked with confusion in his voice. His brother looked at him sadly. "I'm afraid that you have become a victim of a complex scam. Lori, or whatever her real name is, chose you, seduced you, and married you. She and her brother forced you to liquidate most of your assets, invest them in a house in the name of both of you, and then, when you were in the right position, they set you up with Serena to get a divorce on grounds of infidelity. As soon as the divorce was finalized, those two apparently disappeared, taking half of everything you had with them, before we could figure anything out." "No, this cannot be," Seth exclaimed. "I chose her, not she chose me. As far as I remember, you and your partners received quite a lot of publicity after the success of Kandy Korn Kaper, right?" "Yes, but these were only articles in industry magazines." "Didn't you go to that bar regularly?" "Yes, but I approached her myself, and she didn't answer right away." He thought for a moment. "And she was also passionate about the same TV series and games as us." Rajiv and Barry were impressed. Marcus shook his head. "He and Robert were probably looking for a victim in Silicon Valley and came across an article about you. A little research, and they figured out where they could accidentally meet you. And then they just played cat and mouse until you got caught." Seth's expression was full of pain and disappointment. "And I fell for this hook and sinker. I can't believe I was so naive, so gullible." "Don't blame yourself, brother," Marcus reassured him. "These two are clearly professionals. I'm sure you're not their first victim. They knew which strings to press and which notes to play. I've heard of scams like this before, but these two took it to a whole new level. They took the time to find a suitable victim, created false identities, and invested a lot of effort and resources into leading you to the right moment and fleecing you. And they did it in a way that made you feel guilty." Suddenly, Seth's eyes widened. "Do you think Robert is really her brother?" Marcus paused and then shook his head. "Don't think. For that matter, I would assume that he is her lover." Seth turned pale. "But she married me. We went on our honeymoon together. How could she do all this? And how could he allow this? Remember Serena, that woman of easy virtue they hired. She sells herself overnight, but if you pay enough, she'll stay with you for weeks or even months. It was the same with Lori. The greater the potential gain, the more she was willing to invest in this scam. Unfortunately for you, she and her partner hit you big time. Isn't there something we can do? Should I go to the police or sue them? The first obstacle is to find them. They're obviously long gone, and I'm sure they've changed names and created new identities, which will make finding them that much more difficult. We definitely have to report it to the police," Marcus continued, "but that's not guaranteed either. Police will not send resources out of state, especially if it is not obvious that a crime has been committed. But they hired a woman of easy virtue to frame me. They slipped me some kind of substance. I believe you about the substance, but now it's impossible to prove it. As for Serena, wives have been hiring people to check on cheating husbands for a long time. The ethical issue is controversial, but it is not obviously illegal. And since they used the court to get their divorce, this gives them additional protection." He shook his head. "They thought it through very well. If you want my advice, you need to move on and forget about Lori." A determined look appeared on Seth's face. "I'm going to move on, but I'm not ready to just forget about Lori yet." To be continued. Subscribe to the channel and click on the bell so you don't miss the next part of this story. She will be there very soon. The link to the sequel will be in the description of this video below. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think. Click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next one.